welcome to our podcast, Political Posse. I'm Lori Lennon.
And I'm Denise Giannakopoulos.
We have an excellent show today, Denise.
We do. We have lots to talk about, Lori Lennon.
So let's get right into it and talk about what people can expect from us today.
I look forward to this. I'm very excited.
We had the chance to speak with Amanda Hunter. Now, Amanda Hunter is an amazing woman. She is the Director of Communications for the Barbara Lee Family Foundation. And then, well, for those who don't know what that is, Barbara Lee is this incredible woman who gives to a lot of women who are running for office and has been doing research for decades around what it looks like to be a woman in leadership and what voters in general expect from their female candidates. Mm-hmm. So we had a great chat with her. We went down to their office in Cambridge.
Which is very nice. We saw a lot of old-time buttons of women who ran before. And what did we see? We saw some women Barbie dolls.
Yeah, we saw like presidential Barbies.
Yeah, with the power pose.
Yeah.
It was very nice. And the offices are very warm and you just can feel the creativity there. And their mission is all about research and moving women leaders forward and making our voices heard.
And what was very exciting was we saw an old school Nancy Pelosi pin.
She looks the same.
She looks the same.
She looks the same.
Like a boss.
Like a boss.
And so we're going to play that a little bit later. And then we have our political pills section, Denise.
And we're going to talk about a little bit about conversion therapy and how it's still legal in most of this country.
But first, before we get into all that, let's talk a little bit about some of the headlines that have been happening. It doesn't even give it enough justice to say the past 2 weeks have been an absolute shit show.
God.
Since our last podcast.
It's true. My head is spinning with all the information from Roger Stone to just sexual harassment.
Right.
Like, it's
just... So... Well, what most recently happened was the State of the Union, and we should really dig into that.
Laurie, I couldn't do
Spill it, Denise.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't watch him. I couldn't watch him again for the second year. I didn't watch it last year either because I can't deal with the lying. And to know that you have to fact check every single thing that he says, it just blows my mind. We shouldn't have to have that in a president. I'm not saying that no other president stretches the truth because they all get fact checked. But this president in particular just has a way of really embellishing and really being not truthful about a lot of things.
Right.
And people take that as gospel. And he's in a position of power. We should be able to trust him. And I just couldn't do it.
What makes me scared is that, or worried, or scared and worried, is that these platforms we could talk about. This is kind of the same platform as when he gave that announcement in the Oval Office, the first one he did about building the stupid wall. These platforms give him a space to really spew some real bullshit without being checked. And that's the scary part. And usually in reality, we wouldn't have to worry about stuff like that because these State of the Unions are really meant to bring people together.
It's a rah-rah
expand
situation,
your base,
right?
Talk about like how great we're doing and the wonderful things that are happening. And it's really a good way to talk about what the outlook is for the country for the next 2 years or the next year, whatever.
His agenda, the president's agenda of what he wants Congress to focus on, what he is focused on. Right.
But instead, with this president in particular, we get a lot of scare tactics, bending of the truth, misleading information, and lies. And he's able to spew this stuff without being checked in real time. So last night he was on TV for an hour and a half.
Hour and a half? Is that the longest State of the Union?
No, but I was reading this morning that it does kind of fall into Clinton territory.
Does it?
Yeah, and his State of the Union last year, Trump's State of the Union last year was about the same length.
It's like just to hear himself talk.
Yeah. I mean, how many YouTube videos would that make?
Too many.
I mean, seriously. So I would like to preface this with that the New York Times has an article out that fact checks a lot of the stuff that Trump did talk about. Truth, not truths, and bending of the truth.
Yeah, I read a couple of pieces of it. It was really in depth, actually. They were like, oh, this is somewhat true, but it's misleading. And here's why it's misleading. They were very good about being truthful about it.
Right.
I liked it.
And using facts. So we'll add those to the show notes.
Show notes.
My favorite.
Oh God, that.
Why does it crack you up?
I don't know. It makes me laugh so much. Show notes.
Show notes. Well, Denise does like a lot of theater.
I do.
So I guess it does sound a little showy.
It does.
You can like wave your hands like jazz hands.
Like,
show notes.
Show notes.
So I think the overall tone of the State of the Union was very partisan. So there was a few bits of like hints of trying to bring people together in the beginning, but then as the State of the Union kept going on, you could see the way he was speaking, he was facing the Republican side anyway. So it was just a very one-sided conversation. But we do have to give Nancy Pelosi some serious props during the speech. So one thing I will say is that usually the president allows, or the Speaker of the House introduces the president, and then there's some sort of acknowledgement, and it's significant in a lot of ways because, you know, Nancy Pelosi has really broken a lot of barriers and boundaries and stuff when it comes to women in leadership. And I think George W. Bush had recognized that in his State of the Union.
Yeah, I heard that on the Daily this morning.
Yeah.
They were kind of comparing some of the State of the Unions when the president in power lost their party lost control of the House and things. And they were saying George W. Bush was just so good at recognizing Nancy Pelosi as being the first female Speaker of the House and going on to say like how proud her father would be that, you know, she's in this position of power. Mm-hmm. And our president right now basically was like, hello, Madam Speaker. Didn't say congratulations on you becoming like coming in for a second time at the gavel.
And the thing is like, was he confused? Or it was a power grab to say?
I love how you give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm sorry. This man is very calculated.
Yeah,
as much as everyone thinks he's off the cuff or whatever, let's be clear. This is very calculated, and there's a reason for all of it.
I agree.
Well, I'm glad you agree with me. We're going to try not to agree with each other a lot because this could get kind of boring. So maybe we'll bring in different voices at some point. But right now we agree.
Well, we do have a mutual respect for each other.
I think that's what it is.
Maybe that's why we hang out with each other so much too. Because
that and
our own little echo chamber, a little vacuum. Just a couple of points of the State of the Union.
Okay.
One, talking about how he basically asked people to stop investigating him. Because how can we move forward with how can we legislate and advance peace if we're doing war and investigations? It's just, these are the things that drive me crazy. And then you could hear this collective gasp. But then what you did see were a bunch of Republicans standing and clapping and be like, yeah, let's stop the investigation. So it's just compromising himself all the time and talking about spewing lies around like the border and talking about the border and how people are going to be killed and that there's these caravans coming together and like gonna
search the border.
Yeah. You know,
it's not the Alamo.
One of the ones I do want to point out was El Paso, where he was like, El Paso was like a super dangerous city, one of the most dangerous cities, and they built this wall and now they're safe. So when you do read the New York Times, when you do time check or do a fact check for them, this phrase goes, El Paso was never one of the most dangerous cities in the United States, and crime has been declining in cities across the country, not just El Paso, for reasons that have nothing to do with border fencing.
Oh, God.
So it's just, but this is the shit he gets away with when he has like unfettered access to live television. And speaking of paycheck, he did not mention the shutdown at all.
Of course he didn't.
He had 90 minutes to talk and did not take 1 minute or second to really kind of smooth over what had happened for 35 days, shut down the entire government to build a wall. But
I mean, are we surprised? I mean, it's a defeat to him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not going to talk about any of his defeats.
Right.
Like, he lost that battle, so he's not going to talk about it.
Right. But it's dumb.
Oh, it's dumb. It's stupid. And a lot of people are in debt because of it.
Yeah, and even his writers could have come up with some spin to make it sound like it was for everyone's good. I mean, that's what he was spinning the entire time during the shutdown.
That's right. The people were
Behind him because
they want that wall so bad.
National emergency.
That they don't care that they get their paychecks.
Which also he strayed away from.
Fake news, everybody. Fake news.
Fake news. It's true.
I know it's true.
It's scary. And then he also talked about abortion in a really gross way. Talked about ripping babies out of women's uteruses. And that's a sentence he's used before. I remember it was wasn't it during the debate with Hillary Clinton? He just went on this tangent about abortions, and it's such dangerous
rhetoric.
It
is.
Yeah.
I have lots to say about this. I feel like this matter has been talked about over and over and over again. And how are we to move forward as a nation if we keep on revisiting things of the past that have already been settled? I mean, Roe v. Wade, 1973. Let's move on, people. I mean, the states are trying to dismantle it piece by piece and do their own version of Roe v. Wade to prevent women from making choices for themselves. Listen, nobody is for killing anything, really, if you're gonna be clear about it. But that's not up to the government to make a decision of their choice about what is important to their family, what's important to them, their own women's own health and safety, and the decisions that people are making as a family. I mean, it's just, don't get me started. It's just so ridiculous.
Listen, I think all you need to say is that no one should be making decisions about a woman's body except for herself.
I mean,
but we're going to be talking about it a lot. There's going to be a lot of discussions about it, especially as states start to dismantle.
Well, they already have.
Yeah. I was at a NARAL meeting. We have a local chapter here in Arlington that's starting to
gear
build.
up.
Yeah. Thank you, Denise.
You're welcome. I'm here for you.
You're like my other half of my brain.
Well, yeah.
So we had our first meeting, and one of the things that was talked about was Massachusetts becoming an oasis for abortions, just because there are going to be so many states that will not be able to provide women the access to it that they need.
So many restrictions.
Yeah, so I think we should be thankful we live in Massachusetts, stay vigilant, but just also really work to make sure that women have access to it.
Right. And not just abortions, but just healthcare in general. Sorry.
We should get just an entire episode.
Well, yeah. Okay. We're veering off.
But let's talk about something a little bit more positive.
Okay.
Is the Stacey Abrams Democratic response.
She's not refreshing.
She's amazing.
She's just amazing. A great speaker anyway.
From the start, where she started talking about her family and her dad, all the way to the end. Talk about weaving a story.
Before that, she wished everybody a happy Lunar New Year.
Yeah.
How inclusive is that? That's amazing.
Right.
It is the year of the pig, by the way. Just in case anybody knew. You're welcome.
Starbucks knows.
Yeah, Starbucks.
They have a gift card for it.
They do. Year of the pig. I don't know what that means. I should look it up to see what it means. But I'm very excited that she even started off like that.
Yeah. Well, and then the tone was completely different. Now, her tone was inclusive.
Yeah.
It was forward-thinking. She talked about voter suppression. She talked about full-on racism that's happening. Yep. She talked about healthcare in college. And, I mean, she, in a fraction of the time, but also, managed to draft a vision that people can get down with.
Yeah. She even talked about maternity mortality rates that are on the rise here in the richest nation in the world. And we still have to contend with this. Another thing I don't want to get involved in.
Yeah. It was so refreshing. And I know that she's been talked to about running for Senate. And I really hope she does. Because I think
it seems like she's listening. There's been a lot of calls for it. You know what I like too? There was one line, I should have written it down, but I didn't, where she said, I don't want this president to fail. But he needs to listen to what's going on and change something, because she realizes the importance of that office and the tone that he sets for the country. Mm-hmm. And nobody wants him to fail. As much as I do not agree with him, I don't even know how in the hell he got to where he is. I kind of do, but I don't want him to fail either, because if he fails, we all fail and we get pushed back years and years. So hopefully... I don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 years, Laurie. Yeah. I really don't.
I'm hoping. I don't know. And because based on what he had to say, there's not going to be much movement in terms of collaboration and working together to move things forward.
No.
But what we can hope for is that the Democrats and hopefully other Republicans will start working together
Ugh.
to get stuff to go through. Like, just...
I can't.
I'm sorry, Denise.
It seems like a very, I don't know, defeatist time.
Yeah.
And
defeatist and very divisive.
And divisive. And it's like, when is everyone going to start listening to the will of the people and the reason why you were put into office? It's like, stop it already.
Right.
Listen. Start listening. And start voting the way that your constituents want you to.
Right. And Stacey Abrams had said that too, didn't she? She said,
she did.
You know, don't pick your voters. Let the voters pick you.
That's what it was. That was a great line, too. That was
such a great line.
Don't have politicians pick the voters. Have the voters pick the politicians. I thought that was... it was
amazing.
It was perfect. I mean, how do you... Mitch McConnell, how do you say that us expanding voters' rights or having it be easier for everyone to go vote as a power grab? This nation was
so stupid.
I just don't get it.
It's like, wait, giving people access and to vote,
our whole democracy is based on this.
It also shows you that it's the Democrats that are really being suppressed.
And it also shows that the Republicans are scared of it.
Yes.
Because they saw the popular vote and they know where that's going to go. Right. And if more people start voting, especially in the rural areas, it's going to be a different story. So they should be panicking, but they shouldn't be doing it in a way that it suppresses the vote.
Yeah.
Change your message then.
Right, exactly.
I mean, change your message.
The way you campaign,
right.
Change your candidates. Right. Don't just make it harder for people to vote.
And stop manipulating us.
Yeah.
Okay. We go on that one?
Yeah. So let's bring it local just for a minute, and then we're going to get to our interview with Amanda Hunter.
I like local.
This is a topic that's near and dear to our hearts.
Yes, it is.
It's transparency in the State House. So, not a lot of people know this, but there some votes that the House members take are not public, and these are the committee votes. And it's weird that they're not public because these elected officials are put in office by the voters, and we should know how our legislators vote. But right now, it's not required that these things stay public, that these things are public. Now, Denise and I, as we said in our last podcast, I ran for state representative. Denise was my campaign manager. And one of the things that we banded together with a bunch of women on promising transparency if and when we were elected. We signed a transparency pledge because it is a big issue. Yeah.
And it was mostly Emerge women, the Emerge program, which we both are graduates of. And there were a record number of women running this past election cycle.
Right.
Decided that it was important that, and I think it kind of started because of the Safe Communities Act and how the Ways and Means Committee didn't publish who voted for it and who voted against it.
And didn't we run into that with Chapter 70 too?
We did.
Yeah,
we did.
School funding.
So it came out as, well, if we're elected, if Laurie was lucky enough to be elected and all these other women were going to be elected, then we're going to sign this pledge and say when we're in there, we're going to ask for these votes to be made public as they should be, as all committee votes should be. Mm-hmm. They're only made public when there's like a call for it on the floor.
Right.
But this would be a general practice that would happen with every committee vote. The Senate does it.
The Senate does do it.
The House does not do it. Mm-mm. So it was great to see that this vote came up again just recently.
Yeah, there was 3.
Yes.
There were 3 things to talk about. More time to read bills.
Right. They wanted, what, a half hour more?
No, well, that was on the floor. So more time to read bills. They wanted 72 hours to read bills before voting on them. The amendments, to give reps 30 minutes before voting on the floor amendments.
Yep.
And then there was making hearing testimonies and committee votes public.
Right.
So those were the 3.
Right. Happy to announce that all the women who signed that transparency pledge while in their election voted for all 3 of them.
Transparency.
Right.
And an overwhelming amount of Democrats and Republicans voted no. So
my state rep included.
And mine.
Right.
And
people who have pledged for that transparency as well, who are not Emerge, who are men, who it was part of their campaign that they wanted transparency, voted no. When you get a chance, look at Progressive Massachusetts. They have a nice little article about the reasons why some of these elected officials were saying why they voted no against it. And I hate to say it, but some of it is very, very laughable. Yeah. Especially, which one was it, Laurie? The one that got me was like, oh, I'm new. I don't want to disrupt what's happening here in the House in Beacon
that's
Hill.
why people voted
It's like, are you kidding me? Like, did you not get why people wanted you in there? Because you promised you were going to shake it up.
Right.
So, shout out to, like, let's see. Who's our favorite people?
We got Lindsay Sabadosa.
Congratulations.
Maria Robinson.
Yes, from Framingham.
Nika Aguardo from JP.
Mm-hmm.
Tammy.
Yep.
And then we've also got Christiana Minucci.
Yes. Strong work, ladies.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Strong work. Thank you for living up to your pledge to do it, and you proved why people put you in office.
Yeah. And if you're also pissed your legislator voted no, you can call them and tell them how angry you are.
And if you're looking to see how they voted, because some of this stuff isn't made public and it's hard to find.
It's very hard to find.
Please go to Progressive Mass and they give you a nice little rundown of what the amendment was and who voted for what. And can we give a shout out to Representative Liz Malia?
Oh, yeah.
She successfully, finally, have said, and everyone voted for it, which is very nice too, that it will, what was it, Larry? It will be made public, the votes of...
She says, making the text for all bills introduced and admitted in the House must be made available to all members electronically, because it's 2019.
As it should be.
And to the public via the internet, making it easier.
Yes. That's,
to access.
That Mass legislature website is
it's a
disaster. It's like a rabbit hole.
It is.
Remember when we were looking up bills last year just to see like where it ended up and where it is, and you're like, like
what?
Yeah. It was a maze.
It was a maze. It was very difficult to navigate. It's very difficult for people who are just trying to figure out what the hell is going on to figure out.
Right.
And just to find out where bills are in the process.
Mm-hmm.
I
just don't understand why the Senate has it and the House doesn't. What is so difficult? What is so difficult? Right. What are you afraid of?
Well, when you read the Progressive Massachusetts questions, you'll find out that there's a lot of reasons why people don't want transparency. But so check it out. We will also add that to the show notes.
Yeah, show notes.
So that you can check it out.
Are we ready for Amanda Hunter?
Yeah, we're gonna toss it to our interview with Amanda Hunter now. Here we go. So we're sitting here with Amanda Hunter, the Director of Communications for the Barbara Lee Family Foundation. There's been a lot of research that Barbara Lee has done over the years, and especially busy over these past couple of years with the exciting midterms we've had. So welcome to the show, Amanda. Thanks for coming and chatting with us.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the foundation and then your role in the operation?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Barbara Lee Family Foundation is based in Massachusetts. We were started by Barbara Lee, not the Congresswoman, the other Barbara Lee. They're friends, but they're two different women. And Barbara was really a pioneer. She started this foundation 20 years ago and had been kind of in this world before that, because she realized that when women run for office, particularly executive office, they face specific barriers because of their gender. And she wanted an outlet that could perform bipartisan research to empower women to take advantage of opportunities that they have as a result of their gender, and also overcome obstacles that they face as a result of their gender. And so we've been doing research on women candidates for 20 years. She studied every gubernatorial race in the country for the past 20 years that involves a woman.
Wow.
And we have our essential guide is kind of we call it our greatest hits. It's a culmination of that research. So she's just such an inspiring and fascinating woman to work for every day. And it's amazing to listen to her talk about how much the world has changed, and also how much the world has not changed when it comes to women. She always says that when she started this work, it was about hair, hemlines, and husbands. And
it kind of breaks my heart a little bit.
So it's still maybe a little true, but less true, which is good. So I am the Director of Communications and also research for that foundation. So we oversee the research. We work with bipartisan pollsters and kind of look at what the needs are and what would be interesting to study, and then sort of facilitate that process and work to get our message out and as far and wide as we can. So we always like to say we'll pretty much go anywhere that we're invited to talk about the research. We want to share it with everyone, women at all levels, and encourage them to really empower themselves to learn about the landscape when it comes to running for office.
And with this research, what are some of the common barriers that women often tell you about when they're considering running for office?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of barriers, but probably the biggest one that we are really paying attention to in 2020 is that in the focus groups that we've done for 20 years, you hear people say, I would vote for a woman, just not that woman.
Yeah.
And so having multiple women already in the presidential race for 2020 hopefully will take away some people's ability to hide their bias behind that excuse. I sort of doubt it, but that's been a common theme, that there is a lot of entrenched gender bias. Yeah. And also it's important for people to remember that women are not a monolith. Women don't just vote for women as a result of their gender. In fact, voters tend to vote by party and by ideology before they vote by gender. So there are people that sometimes make comments about women voting for women just because of their gender, and that is the opposite of what we've seen.
Right. Yeah, we were listening to the webinar last week. Was it last week?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It seems so long.
It was like a month ago.
It was a month ago. It was entitled Resilience and Rebuilding for Women Candidates After an Electoral Election, which is on your website. So in case anybody wants to check it out, it was very informative. There was one piece that kept on coming up in their research was whining and how they don't want to see women whine. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me right now. Like, if we were doing shots, we would have been hammered, like all the times they said about whining.
Yeah.
And it was disappointing.
It really hurts to hear that word, especially associated with women.
Yeah.
And I think it's safe to say that when people talk about men losing, it's not necessarily whining, it's more like bitter or angry.
Right, and what's your next step? And you go get them the next time, right? And they get all fired up and passionate, but we can't even say, well, can't whine a little bit, I guess. Yeah. But what is whining?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and that's one reason that we wanted to do this research. We wanted to look at what happens with a record number of women who were running for office in 2018. Yeah. We knew that for every woman that broke records, there would be a number of other women that would go home empty-handed. Yeah. And people forget that in 1992, which we all know was the year of the woman before 2018, more women lost their bids for Congress than won. Yeah. So losing for men is almost a belief that it's a prerequisite to a successful career in politics. But we've seen women internalize failure and be reluctant to run again. So we wanted to see, what do voters actually think of this? And we were really pleased to see that voters said they would not hold a loss against a woman. Right. But they certainly had a lot of thoughts on how a woman should handle her loss. And it wasn't just whining, it was perceived whining, too.
Yeah, perceived whining.
Yeah. So it really, all of the research sort of looks like that. Even when you look at likability, we like to compare it to walking a tightrope, because it's almost hard to define. It's use humor, but not too out there. Yeah. Take credit, but also share credit. Right. Dress nice, but not too nice. Yeah. We actually had in our likability study, voters recommend that women look impeccable, was the quote. And you don't see the same standard for men. So you're right that it seems like a double standard that men are not accused of whining or blaming or finger pointing.
Blaming, that was the other
in the
one.
same way.
Blaming.
But overall, we were happy because it was good news.
Yeah, it was really good
for women.
news.
And one thing that is very personal to Barbara since the beginning is the theme of resilience. And Catherine Clark, our congresswoman from Massachusetts, told a story at an event I was at, and she tells it a lot about how she ran for state senate in 2004 and lost. And Barbara called her and said, okay, I gave you 24 hours. What's next? Right. And Barbara believes it's so important for women to do that for each other, because men do.
Right.
The famous Congresswoman Bella Abzug has a quote that says something when she lost an election. She said to the Washington Post, "When a man loses, he's given time for a suntan and a shave and sent back out, and women are expected to go back to the kitchen." And so we were glad that this research was not quite that harsh.
Yeah. There were a lot of positive points of the research. It was saying people just want to see women candidates still be involved in communities and in the community and initiatives that they care about, and just keeping a presence, which seems like any candidate who would be interested in running again, man or woman, should be doing those things.
Absolutely.
Well, let's be clear, they were already involved too before they even ran, right? So, I mean, they're not just going to stop just because they lost. They've always been involved. It's just a continuum now. It's in a different capacity.
Right.
So I think it's pretty interesting that people just think, oh, you run and then you just drop off the face of the earth and not get involved. Well, if they've always been involved, how do you think they came to run?
Right. And we always say, and we saw it more in the past 2 years, that women run for office to solve problems.
Right.
Most women that get involved in politics get involved because something affected their life or their community. They weren't just looking in the mirror thinking they'd make a good-looking politician. And it was so fascinating in the past year to see all the women from so many different professional backgrounds that ran. The New York Times just did a really cool infographic for all the nerds out there that charts every member of Congress and their professional path to Congress and their background. Yeah, and it's like all these like lines and colors. It's really cool.
I think I just saw that.
Yeah. So that's really interesting to remember. And of course, voters do want to see women continue the fight and keep going with the work. But the tough part of that is that we know, and you guys know, that running for office is a tough decision that families make together, and it means months of sacrifice and lost sleep and time away and all of those things. And the feeling of losing a campaign is devastating enough, and then you're tired and maybe you quit your job. And so voters also don't want to see women do anything that can be perceived as self-serving. However, sometimes you have to make decisions after you lose an election. So
well, I know anecdotally for me, when I lost, it was, I had to not only recalibrate myself, but find time to recalibrate my daughter, who had also been through this long process with me, and then finding that balance between not disappearing and not, staying involved, but still making sure that, things at home were recalibrating and things were becoming more centered. But I think, I don't know.
Wasn't there one piece in the webinar too that they said that they weren't really excited if a woman went to go work into like a high-powered company or something like
a high-paying job.
Yeah, I was like, oh God.
That was really that was annoying.
Yeah, that was a little annoying.
Take a high-paying job, write a book.
Write a book.
Which our pollsters, if you listen to the webinar, our pollsters were actually shocked by that because look at all the candidates everywhere that write books all the time.
Well, all the presidential candidates wrote books before they announced.
And most of the men who run too turn into lobbyists, and if that's not a high-paying job, I don't know what is. You know, but we women can't. Well, they shouldn't in the eyes of America or whoever if they want to.
Yeah, but then where is it? Where do we stop caring about that? That's the thing. It's like all these public perceptions of women, and I guess this might lead into what I want to ask next. It's all these public perceptions of women are so different from men, but they're helping women advance. So when do we stop caring about what people think?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and I think it's so interesting to take that and look at 2018 and all of the women that ran for Congress, because if a lot of the women that ran had listened to people, then they wouldn't have run and they wouldn't have won their elections. And I think that what we saw over and over was that instead of trying to fit into an outdated template of what a candidate should look like, and usually that template was built by a man, women ran as their authentic selves, sometimes against conventional wisdom when you look at some of the campaign ads that went viral on social media. And that's because we know from 20 years of research that authenticity is important. Voters really don't like when any candidate, man or woman, seems coached or rehearsed or isn't being authentic. And that's why even if for a man, voters will support a man even if they don't like him, if they believe he's qualified. But they also, even if a man is authentically unlikable, he's still authentic.
Right.
And for a woman, she has to be likable and qualified and authentic. So it's definitely a higher hurdle.
Yeah.
but we saw that that authenticity really resonated with voters in 2018.
Yeah. And so because we had a great 2018 when it came to the midterms, what does that, do you see how that might affect 2020, and also some of the research that you're doing leading up to the presidential election year?
Yeah, 2018 really felt like a movement when you saw all of the records that were broken. And it really goes back to 2017 with women marching and organizing and getting involved. And it was mostly on the Democratic side, but our research showed in late 2017 that Republican women also had a lot of advantages with voters. They just didn't run in the same numbers that Democratic women did.
That was going to be one of my questions. If you see like a surge of Republican women now stepping up and being like, okay, I'm done. They're tarnishing, these men are tarnishing the Republican way right now, maybe they can shed a different perspective on it.
Yeah, and we for the foundation, we can't take a political position either way, but we see that voters believe that women are in touch with their lives, that women will work across the aisle to get things done. And right now, voters on both sides of the aisle are fed up with the status quo. They don't think that Congress was getting anything done at the time that we did that research. And they see that even in the Senate, when you look at the women senators and how they get together and socialize, people will kind of be negative about that sometimes and say, what does that do? Well, at least it's a step in the right direction that they're trying to build relationships. And so that's a difference. We think that the surge of women in 2018 shows that voters are open to voting for women, and the qualities that women bring to the table resonate with voters. However, we also know from all of our 20 years of research that there are additional barriers when women seek executive office. And that's one reason that Barbara started the foundation, because in 1998, I believe, she was following the women that were running for governor across the country, and all of the women who were not incumbents lost. And so she kind of had an aha moment then and saw that there's more barriers when it comes to women. And her ultimate dream was to build a path to the presidency for women, which back then people thought was insane. And she said, who runs for president? A lot of times it's governors, even though that hasn't been as much of a trend lately. And she also used to say, who's on the front page of the paper? The mayor of your city, the governor of your state. And now she says, above the fold, she used to say before, now she says above the scroll on television. But we know that for a woman to be part of a deliberative body like a legislature, that's a little bit easier for voters because she's going to be a decision maker. But if she's going to be the decision maker and essentially CEO of her city or her state, voters need to be convinced even more that she's qualified for the job. Qualifications are assumed for men a lot. They can just kind of put out their resume. They're not questioned. But you can look around and see so many women that ran for executive office that had very admirable resumes that were still questioned. And we're even seeing that now with the 2020 candidates with the headlines and the tweets of can she do it when there are men with far less experience that aren't getting those same questions. So that's a constant barrier that women face.
So how do you envision that barrier being broken? With all that research that you have, like what can women candidates do to seek and get executive offices?
Because I think some of the research too could be almost a detriment too. Like if I saw like don't whine, so in my head I'm thinking, okay, I can't whine. I can't go write a book now because I may not be elected the next time I want to run. So I mean, it's almost like a double-edged sword there. Like how much do we put into this research that we take away and say, okay, this is what I should do the next time I run?
Yeah, it's definitely good to be aware of what voters are thinking and what the research says. But what is really important that we found over and over is being a 360-degree candidate is what we call it, bringing the whole of your experience to the campaign. And we saw that so much in 2018 with women really showing who they were as people instead of just talking about what policies they would support. And that still goes back to authenticity. So any candidate really needs to decide what path makes sense for them, and certainly shouldn't try to be fitting into some type of a template and following everything to the letter of the law, or else it would just make everybody crazy, I think. But what will probably help with women in executive office is having more women run for executive office, because we see in states where there are female governors, like New Hampshire, our neighbor to the north, and Kansas and Arizona, when there's one, it opens the door for more. Michigan just elected Gretchen Whitmer. And when women run in states where another woman has been governor, like when Gretchen Whitmer was just running, she was compared over and over to Jennifer Granholm, just pretty much because they're both women. And you don't see, if a man's running for governor, him being compared to a man of the same party that was governor like 15 years ago. But it does break down those barriers. And so there's a cute story that Maggie Hassan tells in New Hampshire, that a little girl came up to her and said that her brother wanted to be governor, but she said that he couldn't because only girls could be governor.
I love that. That's so cute.
Yeah. So it really does help for voters to see a woman succeed in executive office, and then they see that it's really not a big deal to have a woman doing the job. And so for women running for president, this is the ultimate executive office, but hopefully having more women with different backgrounds and different platforms out there will help break down some of those stereotypes as well.
Do you see a natural pipeline happening across the country with women kind of stepping up and going through whatever they're going through to become more viable and be viewed as qualified?
It's really interesting, because I think that what we saw in the past couple of years is actually women sort of breaking out of the pipeline a little bit, because before it seems like there was a very clear path, especially for women. It was like, wait till your kids get a little older and then run for school board, and then maybe you can run for state rep, and then maybe you can run for Senate when you're old, you know? And now you see women that are skipping 2, 3, 4 steps and running for a higher office. And also, even when their party doesn't support them running, still running anyway and winning in a lot of cases. And so I think it will be really interesting to see, especially when this new Congress gets up and running, if it seems like already the women that have been elected are taking a much different tack in the way that they communicate, in being unapologetic about taking the lead, not sitting back. And so I do think that we all need to pay attention to sexism in the way that the newly elected women are being judged, because we're all going to see, and already have seen, some unfair comparisons on that front. But it's really interesting to see, even with the committee assignments and statements that folks are making right out the gate, that probably 20 years ago women would not have been as out front.
Yeah. And I hope it just helps us as a nation achieve gender parity. I mean, the fact that Nevada is the state that has a women majority, and it's by like 50.8%, is Nevada. It's very disheartening, and it's just, and I feel like the only way that we're gonna achieve that parity is if we continue to do things like skip 2 steps and run for higher office, just because we know we're gonna be able to do it, and it's the only way that we're ever gonna see movement and success. I mean, following these rules that we're told to follow all the time, it's just going to make this turnaround glacial.
Yeah, and the message of wait your turn, I think finally women got really fed up with that in the past couple of years and decided to ignore those calls to wait their turn. Which
Laurie got that when she was running for state rep. They're like, well, why don't you start off with town meeting and see what you can do there? Laurie's like, I don't want to do town meeting. It's like, I have other things I want to accomplish.
My concerns are at the state level.
So so that pipeline is really gonna, the new idea of pipeline is gonna change, I think, in the next couple of years, of what it actually looks like and where we're getting these candidates from now. Because according to that New York Times little graph, the path to a seat at the table is different now.
I think that's important too. Like diversity in your leadership is the way that you can start thinking of new ideas to legislate. And if we're all coming from the same mold, that creativity is lacking.
Yeah, and everybody brings their own perspective to the job, which is so important. And that's because representation is important. And if you want to have a government that looks like the people, then it's important to have some diversity at all levels.
Right.
And having members from so many professional backgrounds is really interesting. When we saw this year so many doctors running for office and teachers, not just lawyers, not just people who had worked on the Hill, which is also that expertise is important. But having that diversity was really interesting because we saw personal narratives of candidates who had been in other jobs, had become activated into politics because they noticed a problem, and then kind of without even realizing it got pulled into politics. And it's really interesting to see candidates that followed that path.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see what these next couple of years are going to bring out for 2020, and not just nationally, but also here locally.
I like it that
a lot
nobody
of momentum.
flinches anymore that another woman comes into play for presidency.
And that more women have announced
I know, it's nice.
than men, which is really wonderful.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
It's an exciting time to be alive.
It's historic, and we all kind of here took a moment to just appreciate the history of that because it immediately went into the naysaying questions from a lot of people. And you hear from a lot of people on the street or on Twitter about, like, is having multiple women going to split the vote? No one asks that about men. No. As many men as possible can run for president. No one asks if their gender is going to split the vote. And again, seeing women less than 24 hours after announcing their bid being criticized, of course, everybody saw that Politico story about Elizabeth Warren asking if she was likable, but even at Kirsten Gillibrand's first news conference in Troy, New York, the first question, the reporter stood up and said something about her being likable. So, and then you have Kamala Harris having her past relationships discussed in not the same way that a man's relationships would be discussed. So there are still plenty of sexism happening. But the fact that there are so many women, and it's also fascinating because women tend to have to feel extra prepared, extra organized. All these women are in the race early. They're organized, they're set up, and then they're still being questioned. Does she have the chops? Can she do it? What staff is she hired? So that's been interesting and frustrating to watch too.
Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of research are you guys working on next? What's the next research
the big reveal?
So we're actually planning our research right now for the next couple of years. So we're probably going to put something out in the fall of 2019 and then put something out again in 2020. And we haven't really finalized yet what that is. We're also always interested to hear what people think would be helpful to look at. That's where we get a lot of our ideas. That's where we got the loss research from. We talked to different groups, that nonpartisan groups that train women, and we asked them kind of what they're hearing and what they're seeing. And then we did a big study this year on sexual harassment too, and that obviously came up organically because it was part of the national conversation in a way we hadn't seen in 20 years. But we're always kind of looking for those things and trying to keep our ear to the ground. So we encourage you guys or anybody else that's listening, if you have ideas, to tell us.
So you guys just all sit in a room and you whiteboard everything, and then you
We do. We actually do.
I can see that
sounds amazing. I would love to be a fly on to see that happen.
Collaborative, so
naturally.
Yeah, we do. We whiteboard everything, and we get feedback from different people that we trust and that we know and what they're hearing and what they've seen candidates face. So when we did our modern family study in 2017, a lot of that was as a result of things that we heard from candidates directly on the trail.
So can you tell everyone how they can either submit suggestions or find the research that Barbara is doing?
So we have all of our research on our website, which is blff.org. And you can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and we're just at blff_org. And so you can message us on Twitter or tweet at us. We love to chat with people on social media or on Instagram and get in touch and tell us what you think would be interesting for us to look at. And maybe if you have experience running for office, what it was like for you. We're always interested to hear that. As you guys were saying, we had our webinar last week, and it was really fun to see people who got on there just talk about their experience and what they went through. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for
Yes,
chatting
thanks,
with us.
Amanda.
This was
Yeah.
really
This is
great.
amazing.
I can't wait
Thank
to
you,
pick your
guys.
brain about the next couple of years
I know.
and the research that you're going to be focusing on.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm excited. And I think the other thing that I want to point out is that we're in Massachusetts, which is a very progressive state, and we've never elected a woman governor. So hopefully.
We're not as progressive as everyone thinks we are.
I know.
I know.
I mean, it's really heartbreaking sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, we have more women in our congressional delegation now than we ever have, which
That's
is good.
right.
And our
Look at you putting a positive spin on it.
our neighbors in Vermont need to step up, but
Yeah.
but New England is definitely a lot more representative than it was when I was younger. So
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting there. It's
We are.
just so slow. But
yeah. Yeah, well, Barbara always says monumental change happens in micro steps, and women just got the
well,
right to vote 100 years ago.
see?
So
oh god. So we're moving.
Yeah, that's great. At least we're moving.
I know we are.
That's right.
Well, thanks for everything. This is
Yeah.
really great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
thank you
hopefully we'll
guys.
talk to you again soon.
yeah,
Yeah.
And keep up the good work here.
yeah, thank you.
So now we come to the part of the podcast which is called Political Pill, which I like a lot, actually. I like these little snippets of like, do you know what is happening everywhere, everybody?
Yeah. And like we said before, there's so much happening
So much happening.
that things that we should really be paying attention to often get buried.
Right.
So this is our time to let something really interesting and important for you to know shine.
So congratulations to New York.
Yes.
You have become the 15th state in the union to ban conversion therapy. 15.
Yeah.
As happy as I am.
How many states are there, Denise?
We all know. I'm hoping Massachusetts will be number 16. We're kind of close. Colorado just did something recently too that they're bringing up conversion therapy themselves. So I'm hoping that it's a wave of sweeping legislation that comes over the country, as this is just not a practice that should be done. It's detrimental to young people, and it creates a lot of they're already dealing with so much as being
Well, it's a very dangerous practice.
dangerous.
So conversion therapy is the practice of trying to basically shock the gay out of children.
Shock the gay and pray the gay away,
Right.
and kind of exorcise this demon out of you,
Right.
and try to betray your true self,
Right.
basically, and try to conform to what society wants you to be, whether it's religious religious beliefs,
a certain society's
Right.
beliefs,
certain societies' beliefs.
not ours.
No, it's not mine. I'm really surprised in Massachusetts.
Yeah. So the defense, this has been brought up a few times to get voted on,
Yeah.
and has been ignored. And the consensus was, well, it's not happening in Massachusetts, so it's
Right.
not a big deal.
It is happening in
It's-
Massachusetts.
It's a big freaking deal.
Yeah,
So it was voted on last session,
it was.
but it was voted on too late.
It was voted on too late, and there was a part of the legislation that, in particular, Rep. Jim Lyons didn't like.
Thank God he's out.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trumwin.
I was just going to say thank you, Drumwin, who is also an Emerge alum, by the way,
Yes.
and who's doing great work as well. He didn't like the fact that it would be considered almost child abuse and that DCF could get involved in it. And it could potentially have your child taken away from you if you are sending your child to conversion therapy and having a licensed therapist perform this. Now, this doesn't go for, like if your pastor decides that you need to kind of pray the gay away. This does not include them. It basically, it includes licensed therapists. This is where the restriction would be, that they cannot perform these things. So Jim Lyons didn't like the fact that it was to be considered child abuse and that social services could come and take the child away. So that's what hung it up. So this year, they're looking to bring it up again. I'm not too sure what it looks like right now, but hopefully there's a vote on it. And we get rid of it in Massachusetts. Hello, we were the first state to recognize marriage, same-sex marriage, not, union or whatever. That was like over 12 years ago.
Right.
Why didn't this get taken care of then? And Jim Lyons is also now the newly elected head of the GOP of Massachusetts, and he is a very conservative man. And he kind of spearheaded the whole overturn of the transgender rights too. He was at the very head of it.
Yeah, he was one of
pushing
the,
it to get it
what is he?
overturned.
One of the initial petitioners who put question 3 on November's ballot.
Gross, number 1.
Yeah.
Gross.
And question 3 was to repeal the law protecting transgender people from discrimination in public places.
Which thankfully the state of Massachusetts and the citizens overwhelmingly said, no, we want to keep it as it is. We need to protect our trans brothers and sisters.
Right. So I took a couple notes about
Show notes?
Jim Lyons. So during his legislative career, Lyons was known as Beacon Hill's leading abortion opponent and had spearheaded an unsuccessful effort to amend the state constitution to block state money from funding abortions for low-income women.
Low-income women!
As a result, the Planned Parenthood Advocacy Fund of Massachusetts made Wynn's campaign its top legislative priority because he was that dangerous.
And now he's head of the GOP here in Massachusetts. You're welcome, Massachusetts. You're welcome. But
Denise,
what?
So what people can do is call
your legislators. Yep, and say you want a ban on conversion therapy.
Right. Now. So call your legislator. Let's get conversion therapy banned here.
Yes, let's get some good news.
Let's be the 16th state in America.
I like it.
Continue working on the rest. We'll get to 50.
Right. Be involved, everybody.
Yeah.
Politics is local. There's some municipal elections happening this year. We're going to say it is throughout our podcast for this whole year. Get involved. Make phone calls. Find somebody that you want to get involved with and make sure that he or she
has the support they need.
Yeah. Because it's hard to run.
Yeah. And even though some people call it a quiet election year, it's not.
There's
a lot to do.
And
right.
Get involved.
Stay vigilant.
Yes. We'll be posting some of the ways that you can get involved on our Political Posse website, politicalposse.com. Call your legislator about everything. And hold their feet to the fire about this transparency thing, too. Right. We got to start holding them accountable more often than not.
Right. We have a right to know how our legislators vote.
This should be a no-brainer.
Every vote should be public, not only public, but easily accessible.
Easily accessible.
So let's make it happen.
That's right. Power to the people.
So this leads us to the end of our podcast, Denise.
Don't forget to subscribe to us.
Yep, we're on all the podcast channels.
We are.
So hit us up. Give us a review. Let us know how we're doing.
That's right.
And check out our website again.
Right.
It's politicalposse.com.
Right. Till next time.
See you later.